Young and the Restless spoilers. What began as a reckless attempt to outrun reality slowly hardened into a moment that none of them would ever escape. The night Kane and Phyllis stumbled out of the party was already heavy with poor decisions, their laughter too loud, their closeness too careless. The alcohol blurring lines that should never have been crossed. Neither of them spoke the truth aloud, but both understood what they were doing as they made their way back to the hotel, drawn together by a shared hunger for distraction rather than desire. It was not love that pulled them into that room, but exhaustion, resentment, and the dangerous belief that one mistake could be compartmentalized and forgotten. Inside the hotel suite, the world narrowed to impulse, to the false comfort of bodies pressed together, to the illusion that the consequences waiting outside the door could be silenced if they did not acknowledge them. In that fragile, reckless moment, Kane betrayed not only Lily, but the man he believed himself to be, while Phyllis crossed a line she had always insisted she would never approach again. Elsewhere, Lily's unease refused to fade. It began as a quiet tension in her chest, the kind that could not be explained by logic or dismissed by reassurance. She told herself she was overreacting, that Kane had earned her trust. That suspicion would only poison what they had fought so hard to rebuild. Yet the feeling only intensified, sharpening with every unanswered message. Every minute that passed without explanation, her worrying transformed into dread, and dread into resolve. Against her better judgment, Lily made her way to the hotel, her thoughts spiraling between fear and denial, clinging to the hope that she would arrive to nothing more than embarrassment for doubting the man she loved. Each step closer felt heavier than the last, as if some part of her already knew the truth she was about to face and was desperately trying to slow her down. The door opened, and whatever remained of Lily's certainty shattered instantly. The sight before her did not require interpretation or explanation. Kane and Phyllis together was not a misunderstanding, not a coincidence, not something that could be talked away with excuses. It was raw, undeniable betrayal exposed in a single, devastating image that burned itself into Lily's mind. Time seemed to collapse inward as shock gave way to rage, heartbreak, and a profound sense of humiliation. In that moment, the past, the sacrifices, the promises, and the years of shared pain and healing all twisted into something grotesque and unrecognizable. Lily did not scream. She did not cry. The silence that overtook her was far more dangerous, the stillness of someone whose world has fractured beyond repair. The gun felt unreal in her hand, a weight she had never imagined carrying, yet one that suddenly felt inevitable. Lily's thoughts raced, not toward violence, but toward devastation, toward the unbearable realization that everything she believed in had been stripped away without warning. Betrayal did not simply wound her, it erased the foundation beneath her feet. Her anger was not theatrical or explosive, but focused and consuming, fueled by a sense of being reduced to an afterthought in her own life. In that fractured state, Lily did not think about consequences or morality. She acted from a place of pure emotional overload, where pain eclipsed reason and survival instinct blurred into destruction. The gunshot tore through the room, a deafening rupture that instantly destroyed any illusion that this night could be undone. Kane reacted without thought, propelled by instinct and guilt in equal measure, moving to shield Phyllis as if his body could absorb the weight of his choices. The bullet struck his shoulder, the impact knocking him backward as blood spread quickly, staining the floor and his clothes, transforming shock into immediate, physical reality. Kane collapsed, the pain searing, his breath uneven, the world tilting violently as he realized that his attempt to protect had only deepened the damage he caused. Phyllis froze, her panic immediate and visceral as she watched Kane fall. The adrenaline that had fueled the night drained away, replaced by terror and disbelief. This was no longer a secret or a mistake. It was a catastrophe unfolding in real time. The sight of blood shattered whatever justification she had clung to, forcing her to confront the irreversible cost of her actions. She was no longer a participant in a reckless affair, but a witness to violence born from betrayal, her presence now inseparable from the trauma etched into this moment. Lily stood motionless, staring at the gun in her hand as if it belonged to someone else. The weight of what she had done crashed down on her all at once, horror replacing rage, disbelief flooding her senses. She had crossed a line she could never retreat from, and no amount of regret could erase the sound of the shot or the image of Cain bleeding at her feet. The room descended into chaos, voices overlapping, movement frantic, yet Lily remained suspended in a moment of devastating clarity. Nothing would ever be the same again. Not her marriage, not her sense of self, not the lives of the three people trapped in that room. That night would come to define them all, not as lovers or rivals, but as survivors of a moment that permanently altered their trajectories. Cain's injury was not just physical, but symbolic, a scar that would forever remind him of the price of betrayal and misplaced loyalty. Phyllis would carry the weight of knowing that her choices had ignited a chain of events she could never fully control. And Lily, forced to live with the knowledge that pain pushed her beyond her own limits, would face a future shaped by guilt, grief, and the irreversible consequences of a single, devastating decision. The hotel room, once meant to hide a mistake, became the site of a reckoning where three lives collided and fractured beyond repair, bound together forever by the echo of a gunshot that refused to fade into silence. The deafening crack of the pistol shot still echoed in the cavernous atrium of the Genoa City Athletic Club, bouncing off the marble pillars like a judge's gavel sealing a fate. The smell of burnt gunpowder mixed sickeningly with the expensive perfume of the gala's fleeing guests. Lily Winters stood frozen, her hand trembling violently as the smoking gun slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Across the room, Cain Ashby clutched his shoulder, his face a mask of shock rather than pain, blood seeping through his white tuxedo shirt like a blooming crimson rose. He looked at her not with anger, but with a devastating confusion that cut deeper than any bullet. "Lily," he gasped, his knees buckling as he collapsed near the hors d'oeuvres table. I didn't mean," Lily's voice was a fractured whisper. The flashing lights of the GCPD cruisers outside painted the room in chaotic bursts of red and blue. Chief of Police Paul Williams was the first to reach her, his expression grim. "Lily Winters, I need you to step away from the weapon. Now." As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, the cold steel biting into her skin, Lily looked toward the entrance. Phyllis Summers stood there, her emerald green gown perfectly still amidst the pandemonium, her eyes wide and unreadable. For a fleeting second, their gazes locked in a silent exchange of horror and a dark, shared secret that had finally exploded into violence. The holding cell at the GCPD station was a stark contrast to the opulence of the life Lily had been living. The gray concrete walls seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with the weight of her actions. She sat on the thin cot, her head in her hands, replaying the moment over and over. The way Cain had leaned in to whisper to Phyllis, the smirk on Phyllis's face, the sudden, blinding rage that had overtaken her since a culmination of months of gaslighting, betrayal, and the agonizing suspicion that the father of her children was plotting against her family's legacy. She hadn't meant to pull the trigger. She had only wanted to scare him, to make him stop, to make him listen. But the gun, a relic from the Chancellor estate she had foolishly kept in her purse for protection during these volatile times, had gone off. Lily. She looked up to see Devin Hamilton on the other side of the bars. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usual composure shattered. "Is he?" Lily couldn't finish the sentence. "He's out of surgery," Devin said, his voice tight. "He's going to live." But Lily, the doll is going for attempted murder. They're saying it was premeditated. They found the texts on your phone. Lily squeezed her eyes shut. The angry texts. The threats she had sent in moments of weakness when the jealousy consumed her. "It wasn't like that, Devin. You have to believe me." "I want to," Devin said, gripping the bars. But the narrative is already spinning out of control. And Victor is making sure of it. High above the city in his executive office at Newman Enterprises, Victor Newman stood by the window, looking down at the ant-like cars navigating the snowy streets. He took a sip of his tequila, a predator savoring the scent of blood in the water. The Winters girl has finally cracked. Victor murmured to himself. He turned to his desk, where a file labeled Abbott Communications lay open. He pressed the intercom button. "Get me my legal team," and leaked the story to the Chronicle. I want the headline to read, "Chancellor Winter's CEO unhinged, a legacy of violence. Make sure the shareholders of Abbott Communications know exactly who they are in bed with." Victor smiled thinly. The shooting was a tragedy, yes, but in the cutthroat world of corporate warfare, it was an opportunity. With Lily behind bars and the Winters family scrambling to save her, Chancellor Winters would be leaderless. And Abbott Communications, their new partner in the AI venture, would be vulnerable to a hostile takeover. It was the opening he had been waiting for to crush Jack Abbott and Billy once and for all. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur of legal motions and family arguments. The Winters clan was fracturing under the pressure. Devin and Nate Hastings were at odds over the defense strategy. Nate, ever the pragmatist, wanted Lily to plead insanity, citing the immense stress of the corporate merger and her history of trauma. Devin refused, insisting that pleading insanity would destroy Lily's future and her children's respect for her. "She's not crazy," Devin shouted in the hallway of the courthouse. She was provoked. "We need to find out what Kane said to her." "Kane isn't talking," Nate shot back. "He's claiming amnesia about the argument. He's protecting someone, and until we know who, Lily is a sitting duck." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery was packed with Genoa City's elite reporters and curious onlookers hungry for the downfall of a socialite. Lily sat at the defense table, looking smaller than ever in a simple gray suit, her eyes fixed on the table. The prosecution was ruthless, painting Lily as a jealous, vindictive ex-wife who couldn't handle Kane moving on. They played the voicemail she left him the night before he had drunken, tearful rant that sounded damning in the cold light of the courtroom. Then the defense called their surprise witness. "I called Phyllis Summers to the stand," Lily's lawyer announced. A ripple of shock went through the courtroom. Phyllis had been conspicuously absent from the press, refusing to comment. As she walked to the stand, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood, she avoided looking at Victor, who sat in the back row, his eyes narrowing. "Ms. Summers," the lawyer began, "you were standing right next to Mr. Ashby when the gun was fired. What did you see?" Phyllis took a deep breath. She looked at Kane, who was sitting in the front row, his arm in a sling. His eyes pleaded with her to stay silent, to stick to the script. Then she looked at Lily, the woman she had tormented for years, now broken and facing 20 years in prison. "I saw a woman pushed to the brink," Phyllis said, her voice steady. "Objection," the prosecutor cried. "Speculation." "Overruled," the judge said. "Continue, Ms. Summers." Phyllis turned to the jury. Lily didn't just snap out of nowhere. She reacted to a threat made by Kane Ashby. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel furiously. "Order! Order in this court!" What threat? The defense attorney pressed, sensing the turning tide. Phyllis gripped the railing of the witness stand. Kane told her that he was going to take the children. That we had made a deal with Victor Newman to dismantle Chancellor Winters, and that once the company was gone, he would have sole custody because she would be destitute. Victor stood up, his face purple with rage. "This is preposterous. A lie. Sit down, Mr. Newman," the judge roared. Phyllis didn't flinch. "It was a lie, of course. I never made that deal." But Kane, he wanted to hurt her. He wanted to break her so she would sign over the voting rights to the AI protocol. He used me to do it. He leaned in and whispered that she had lost everything: her company, her kids, her dignity. That's when she pulled the gun. It wasn't attempted murder. It was a desperate attempt to stop a monster from taking her life away. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. Kane's face had drained of color. He slumped in his seat, realizing his double game had been exposed. He had been playing both sides, promising Victor the AI rights in exchange for a payout, while trying to manipulate Lily into submission. Lily stared at Phyllis, tears streaming down her face. It was the truth. The twisted, ugly truth that she hadn't been able to articulate because she thought no one would believe her over St. Kane. The cross-examination was brutal, but Phyllis held her ground. She admitted to her own manipulations in the past, but insisted that this time she was a pawn in Kane's game, not the mastermind. She revealed that she had recorded the conversation on her phone and insurance policy she always kept when dealing with the Newmans. When the audio was played for the court, Kane's voice rang out, cold and cruel, detailing his plan to gaslight Lily until she hands over the keys to the kingdom. The verdict came back 3 days later. Not guilty of attempted murder. Guilty of assault with a deadly weapon, but with a suspended sentence and mandatory psychiatric counseling, considering the extreme emotional duress and provocation. Lily walked out of the courthouse a free woman, but she was not the same person who had entered. The press thronged around her, but she ignored them, her eyes scanning the crowd for the redhead. She found Phyllis standing by her car, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. Lily approached her slowly. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you save me? You hate me." Phyllis exhaled a plume of smoke, looking up at the gray winter sky. "I don't hate you, Lily. I envy you. You have a family that fights for you. You have a legacy." She dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her heel. "And besides, I couldn't let Victor win. He thought he could use me, use Kane, use you. Like we're just pieces on a chessboard. I wanted to flip the board." "Kane is ruined," Lily said quietly. "The twins, they'll never look at him the same way." "Better they know the truth than live a lie," Phyllis said, her voice hard. She turned to face Lily, her expression softening just a fraction. "Don't think this makes us friends. I know what it's like to be the woman holding the gun because she feels like she has no other choice." That night, the Winters' home was quiet. Devin and Nate had left, giving Lily space to decompress. She sat in the living room, staring at the fire. The legal battle was over, but the internal war had just begun. She had shot the man she once loved. She had exposed the father of her children as a manipulator, and she owed her freedom to her nemesis. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Victor Newman. "This isn't over. You may have won the battle, but the war for your company has just begun." Lily picked up the phone. Her hand, which had trembled so violently in the athletic club, was steady now. She deleted the message and tossed the phone onto the cushion. She walked to the window and looked out at the lights of Genoa City. The scandal had changed everything. She was no longer just the dutiful daughter or the grieving widow or the romantic lead. She was a survivor who had walked through fire. "Bring it on, Victor," she whispered to the empty room. The reflection in the glass stared back at her eyes hardened, jaw set. The young and the restless were always fighting for tomorrow, but for the first time in a long time, Lily Winters was ready to fight for herself.